Hello and welcome to the Josh and Tyler Show. Today we're reviewing our best black and white films. This is my old-timey radio voice. Tyler, how are you doing? I think we're sponsored by Dove Soap, but it's not for men, only women. How are you doing? No, just kidding. What's up?
Not a whole lot. You're right. That was a pretty good bit.
I had a gag there, so, you know. Yeah, we had to go for the gag.
I like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I just, I've watched enough old TV shows and it's World War II and people are dead. I've seen enough of those things,
Yeah, Legend of Korra does that, as a previously on, they have a radio announcer do the exact same thing.
I don't know. It's been a while.
Because it takes place in, a Prohibition era type of setting, just people have magical powers.
I've actually seen that show a couple times. My wife loves it. No, I just had to go for a gag. It's been a while since I did a good gag. The other weeks I've just been playing it straight with, because there's so many choices and it's more thinking. But today, it was very clear cut for me. I only got 400 mentions on this thing. Anyway, black and white films. Are you a fan? Have you watched a bunch? Do you like the medium? What are your thoughts on these?
Black and white is something that, weirdly enough, I haven't really spent that much time observing, as most of the classical movies that I did in my original series just happened to be in Technicolor or Panavision. There weren't that many black and white movies that I immediately sought out, but there were some honorable mentions that are on this list that I think are incredibly good. There are a couple cheats where I have more modern stuff that was made in black and white for artistic reasons, but it is a medium that I wish filmmakers would take more advantage of, because sometimes the minimalism of having two colors on screen just makes everything a hell of a lot better. And that was what motivated a decent amount of choices on this list. And on top of that, some of them, in fact, my number one specifically, you could watch in color and it would make absolutely no difference. And that's something that a lot of audience members just do not get with black and white. They just instantly associate it with something that was made pre-1950s, or they think of it as using black and white for flashbacks only, except for Better Call Saul, where they tell the flash forwards in black and white, which I think is a pretty clever role reversal. But
well, I think I might have your number one pick on my honorable mention, so if I say it, just don't say anything.
I doubt it.
I don't know. It was one of those that I thought was actually better in black and white than was in color, but that's me. So, yeah.
I think I know what your choice is, but if I'm correct, it's actually not on my list.
Oh, okay. Well, why don't you start us off?
I went with a different movie that's along the same line.
Why don't you start us off with your honorable mentions here? We'll jump into the show so we don't,
Okay, so there were quite a few honorable mentions that I struggled with. One of the best black and white ones that I saw in my classic movie series was the Beatles comedy A Hard Day's Night. It took a little while for me to really get into the story and the humor, because as much as I love Beatles music, I don't really know that much about the Beatles themselves. So the parody took a while for me to get accustomed to, until it became clear the story was about Ringo, because nobody fucking cared about Ringo back then, and they don't care about him now. And this
I like him. I like him. I like his drumming. He's
you and Marge Simpson, but outside of that, the movie just reminded me, oh yeah, he existed. That's a real damn shame.
His solo albums are better than George Harrison's or most of John Lennon's Plastic Ono bands. I love his solo stuff. It's just really good. I mean, they have good stuff, but his solo albums are number two for me, because Paul McCartney's solo albums, I don't know, just always get me so.
But yeah, it was one of the original backstage musicals. It was one of the original fake rock documentaries, because it had that quick cutting handheld style that hadn't really been done yet, because it was made in 1968. So there were a lot of technical achievements. There was some really good physical comedy, because it was directed by Richard Lester, I believe was his name. I'm not entirely sure. He made this and their other movie Help, and he was really good with visual comedy. And he was also a good friend of Peter Sellers, too. They worked together on a couple of other projects. So I can kind of get where that comes from. There's one Canadian comedy that my friends showed me a few years ago called My Winnipeg, directed by Guy Maddin.
I've heard of... Oh, Guy Maddin was huge in the 90s. Oh, my goodness. I've heard
depending on who you ask, but...
he did a Dracula thing.
Yeah, and that was kind of the reason it's not on my list because there are some parts that do drag and some bits that are the big comedic element of My Winnipeg is that Madden narrating his own story tends to repeat certain jokes for comedic effect. And the first time around, I was out of breath laughing. I could not believe what my friends were showing me. Upon rewatch, there is some stuff that makes me smile, but it doesn't really make me chuckle all that much. But still, it's a really inventive and surrealist mockumentary about just what a shit show Winnipeg is, but also why they wouldn't trade it for anything else, which yeah, sounds about right. And my other honorable mention, a lot of people are going to be shocked about this because I made a video about it. Parasite Black and White does have some elements that are superior than the colorized version.
It's on my honorable mentions as well. I 100% agree.
Namely the production design and the costume design that really like emphasizes the black and white costumes a little bit more, especially with the richer family. But the other problem that I had with it, and I made it clear in this video, for one, those things could be noticed in color and still be analyzed and respected. And the other thing is that because we saw the more suspenseful scenes in color, they don't really have the same amount of effect in black and white. Whenever someone gets assaulted or killed, the blood just doesn't look that authentic. It doesn't have that psycho element to it where you only see the shower sequence in black and white. And if you did see the shower sequence in color, it's the crappy Gus Van Sant version, and that doesn't really count. But and speaking of which, Psycho is also an honorable mention of mine because as a suspense thriller, it was one of the originals. It was one of the original slashers. That shower sequence in particular, it still creeps me out. It's still incredibly suspenseful decades upon decades later, but there are a couple performances and some characters that I didn't really care about that kind of weighed the movie down a little bit for me.
Well, Psycho is one of my favorites Hitchcocks of all time. So, whatever you say is probably going to bounce off me because I love that movie.
Hey, it's totally.
I love the atmosphere. I love how it gets under your skin. Does it have a little bit of cheese? 100%. But I just love the atmosphere Hitchcock creates with that. I will echo your Parasite black and white. I actually think the blood's superior in black and white. I think the whole film just looks because you're not looking because when you're in black and white, you're focused more on the characters and the dialogue, and then anything that makes a splash of color, like the blood or the costumes, or even the water, the way it contrasts in the black and white, really draws more attention to it. I saw it once in color and 3 times in black and white. And I think it's actually superior for me because that's when I started to pick up on things. And would I have got the same experience if I watched it in color the second time? Probably not because it's bright and colorful. And I think black and white really has an attention and a draw to things that you wouldn't notice. The way the windows are framed and the reflections, particularly, really, there is that awful gloss in black and white that really just draws you to it, but it shows you the way they are captive to this sort of system or prisoners to their self, if an analogy there. And I didn't really catch that because in color they can dim down the brightness of the windows and such. So
I have seen Parasite twice in color and once in black and white, so maybe you have a little bit of an advantage.
I just really like the black and white cut. I'm probably going to do the Criterion one day, but not today. Because I really enjoyed Parasite. I think it's one of the most interesting movies I've ever seen in my lifetime. I will throw out there The Man Who Knew Too Much, 1935. I love a good Hitchcock. Peter Lorre, I've talked about this at length, I'm sure, in another video. I love this film. I do think it's superior to the Cary Grant 1955 version. It's just personally, this is the one I grew up with and I've watched, and it's the one I know. I've watched the Cary Grant version, nothing against it, just I love this black and white version. It's like the black and white M is another one I love, or Dial M for Murder, they had a black and white version as well as color. I saw it in black and white on TV first. I like my old Hitchcock. I will throw out there Cary Grant's His Girl Friday. I adore this movie. It was always on TV. It's something that I can put on. It's nostalgia for me. It's fun. They made a couple of movies in this series. It's just a really fun little romp. It's nothing heavy. It's nothing crazy. It's just a really nice movie. I watch it with my mom about once a year. We love this thing. To Kill a Mockingbird, Gregory Peck. I love this movie. You've seen this, I think, yes?
You'll see it on my list somewhere.
Yeah, I've watched this many a times. I think it's very well done. I think this is one of Gregory Peck's finest performances. And it's just a really, really great novel to film adaptation. It's one of those books I had to read in school. I will throw out there Logan black and white. I think this worked really well in black and white. I love Logan. I love it in black and white. I love it in color. I just think it's sort of the same experience, but it's really neat to see in black and white. That's why I'm putting it on my honorable mention here. My last honorable mention I want to throw out there is 1933's Vampire Bats. Now you're probably like, I've never heard of this. This is one of those free movies I watched on YouTube or on TV. It's basically like a Dracula knockoff because they were going off all that. It's directed by Frank R. Strayer, who directed really nothing else that anyone will know unless you were alive in the 20s and 30s. So, yeah, I really, really like it. It's a fun, campy vampire bat type of movie about these people in a hotel, and they got a detective trying to solve it, and then you got Lionel Atwill as Dr. Oddville Vaughn. I always forget how to pronounce his name. He was in Captain Blood and a couple other those cheesy monster movies and Errol Flynn movies from the 30s and 40s. So I really like Vampire Bats. I actually own it on Blu-ray because I like it so much. It's a stupid movie to own, but I enjoy Vampire Bats. It's sort of like one that I didn't want to put on this list. That's just too dumb. What's that one? Killer Leeches or something. It's dumb, but it's sort of like a cheesy monster flick. But this is from the 30s as opposed to Killer Leeches being from the 50s, and that's a Roger Corman production. So that's just pure cheese and pulp right there. So stuff like that. Yeah, my honorable mentions is short this week. Last week was a lot harder with the yeah.
Yeah, it was tough.
Yeah, it was tough for war films.
This was a lot easy. This was a list that was much easier for me to narrow down. I thought for sure you were going to put Plan 9 at least as an honorable mention, just for.
I don't like Plan 9 from Outer Space. I've seen it. It's fine. I mean, like I enjoyed Plan 9 in a bunch of his films for what they are, but they're really, really bad. They're hard to watch. It's like, and I mean, like even as classic as the George A. Romero's the Dead franchise, the very first one, I don't love it as much as most people, and I don't really like The Day the Earth Stood Still or Metropolis. I'm that weird person, and I'm not a Citizen Kane guy. I like different classics for me. So
yeah. That reminds me. Tim Burton's Ed Wood is another honorable mention. One of the best Johnny Depp performances. Martin Landau as Bela Lugosi was fantastic. A completely spot-on impression and makeup job. Sarah Jessica Parker actually gets to show her acting chops for once. It makes me wonder what the hell happened. But
well, someone was having Sex in the City, so I don't know.
Oh yeah, true. What was I thinking?
Hey, it's a gig. If you got a gig that paid you a bunch of money, you would take it as an actor.
And got an Emmy out of it.
Yeah, I mean, hey, it gives you cred. You do rom-coms for the rest of your life. You get a steady paycheck. You're acting. It's solid. Yeah, and then I did disinclude a lot of war movies from my list because, well, we did war movies last week, and you know how much I love Run Silent, Run Deep, and All Quiet on the Western Front, and a lot of these films. So, Tyler, what's your number 6 black and white movie, personally? What do you got?
My number 6 came out in 2005, and it was directed by one of your favorite directors ever, if not your favorite, Robert Rodriguez.
You got City.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, as opposed to movies that use black and white and color at different points in time, like Wizard of Oz or Memento, the great thing about Sin City is just the way that black and white and color go together in every frame of this movie so seamlessly. The effect that it has to emulate Frank Miller's original comic, and it definitely helps that Frank Miller was actually the co-director on this just out of respect for artistic integrity. It all looks really good, and it was such a time-consuming process in order to get certain colors on characters in regards to their clothing, their eye color, their hair, blood, explosions, all of that. It was such a long process to maintain the black and white image while still signaling out these objects that Rodriguez had to do something really unique. He filmed it all on a green screen, and there were so many takes of scenes where it was really just one actor in the scene by itself, just acting off of, I don't know, a tennis ball or a piece of tape when they have to look at someone as they're speaking. And then once Rodriguez got the right take, he would green screen both the actors in together. And the big problem with Sin City is that sometimes that effect is incredibly noticeable when they're looking in the wrong area or when they're quote unquote punching each other. It doesn't look authentic. I don't buy for a second that Mickey Rourke is actually fighting Elijah Wood. I do believe that they're doing their own stunt work. Like that goes without saying. But when Rourke punches Wood and he spits out blood, like Wood's just looking at the screen. That's really all he's doing. But at the same time, the movie's level of violence is so over the top and cartoony. Like Mickey Rourke gets hit by a car 3 times and gets back up like it's nothing, and it's a fucking electric chair that kills him. But that's the kind of world that Rodriguez and Miller are creating. And in my opinion, this style really fits the move that he's going for so seamlessly. The black and white maintains this level of grit and seriousness despite all of the cartoony violence. But whenever there's an explosion, blood spatter, or you're looking at an evil character's eyes, it really draws your attention and gives more of an emotional impact. And in regards to the performances, which I think are one of many reasons people really love this movie, is that the dialogue is so over the top and pretentiously poetic, but all the actors deliver their lines in such a low-key delivery that makes them seem much more sophisticated and charming than they actually are. Mickey Rourke gives my favorite performance as Marv. He's incredibly badass, and his motivation is simple in the best possible way. A lonely guy who had the time of his life with a woman he never met, and when that woman dies, he feels eternally grateful towards her and decides to go out on this murder mystery, killing everyone he can within a few seconds. Doug Walker said something really interesting about Sin City, that in his opinion, it was the most violent movie he had ever seen because not a minute goes by without someone getting punched or killed. Which actually, I don't think there are that many other movies like that out there. But yeah, Mickey Rourke is really good. Bruce Willis has not been that good in years as John Hartigan.
No.
Even actors who I don't think are really all that good, like Jessica Alba or Nick Stahl, they do some really great work here.
Jessica Alba is great in this movie. I don't care what anybody says.
And from what I understand, because I haven't seen the sequel, she gets a lot more to do and gets a little bit better as a character in A Dame to Kill For.
It's the sequel's a little confusing plot-wise, and it jumps around, and the characters aren't really the main characters. It's alright. I like Ava Green, who Casino Royale fame, and Killing
She's the Dame to Kill For, right?
Yeah, she's the Dame to Kill For. She's really the best actress in the sequel because it was directed by the creator as opposed to just Robert Rodriguez and someone collaborating. So it's a sort of a case of the prequels. But man, I love this movie. The particular sequence where they're putting the car in the swamp or whatever. Oh my goodness, that's one of my favorite scenes. They're lowering the bodies in. They have the gunfight, and he's just taking bullets, and it's not phasing him, but he'll get away regardless. I love the overarching. I love the narrator in this. It suits this type of film. Most films, you don't want a narrator, you don't want exposition, but you just want that sort of like 1950s detective being like, I forgot to take my medicine today. Oh well. I just love that.
A lot of people think Marv is crazy, but the truth of the matter is he was just born in the wrong year.
Mm-hmm.
A great Viking swinging swords in the battle.
I really love Sin City. It's probably it's up there for my top 5 Rodriguez films because it's just absolutely phenomenal. Actually, I would say that probably Once Upon a Time in Mexico is actually more violent.
In terms of like gore, or in terms of how many like fights there are?
Oh well, gore and then the amount of fights, because this is it's the third one in the trilogy for Rodriguez. So Antonio Banderas and Simon Helek are being hunted by Johnny Depp constantly. So he shows up in like every other scene where they're having a fight, and at one point Johnny Depp loses his eyeballs and he's still hunting them. It's completely nuts. So Sin City's definitely up there for violence, but like this is I like Rodriguez. I like this pick. I think this is a great number 6 on your list because I'm sure there's better films to come for sure.
There are definitely better films to come.
But this is still great, and I have watched it way too many times. My number 6 is 1939. You'll hear me say it. I love 1939. You know me. 1939, The Hounds of the Baskervilles. This is directed by Sidney Landfield, who's directed the original Addams Family and McHale's Navy. He directed up to 1967 until his death there. It stars Richard Gere as Sherlock Holmes, and this is, for me, my favorite adaptation of Sherlock Holmes beside the TV version of Basil Rathbone. Richard Gere is the Baskerville. Basil Rathbone is Sherlock Holmes. This is based on the TV series. And Nigel Bruce is Dr. Watson. And this is, again, the same old story of the Hounds of the Baskervilles, but it is told with such excellent and finesse. It is only 1:20, as some of the older films were. But the way it's shot, it's very much like an Agatha Christie, Miss Marple, sort of put everyone in a room after they investigate. And it really reveals the brilliance of Sherlock Holmes. Now, as a Sherlock Holmes fan, I've read all the books. My grandpa gave my mom the complete works in the big fancy, like 1950s edition, so I've got a chance to get my hands on that. That's really, really neat. I did enjoy the Jeremy Brett 1980 PBS version. But they really got Sherlock Holmes right. People want to see Sherlock Holmes as an action guy, little things to said. But Sherlock Holmes is straight up a man who smokes weed and then tells you how it's done. That's it. There's no action. There's no like, oh, thought bubbles are in my head. Oh, look, I'm a cucumber man. There's no like, look at me, I'm Robert Downey Jr. I'm elementary. Look, Watson's a girl. No, it's none of that. It's strictly a man getting high and telling you how it is. Whether he's right or wrong, I don't know, because it could be all an illusion. But Basil Rathbone is the greatest Sherlock Holmes of all time. He just nails the poise, the finesse. He's perfectly British in his performance. His outfits match exactly to the book. This, dare say, could be the greatest book-to-film adaptation in history. It nails it, makes it entertaining, the dialogue is witty, the supporting cast is absolutely phenomenal. We get Robin Hood as Baskervilles. The way they paint the manor, which is the main setting for all of this, and the stagecoach and such, and the mystery that if you haven't seen The Hounds of the Baskervilles, go read it. I know it's from 19 whatever, but seriously, it's one of the most gripping mystery novels you'll ever read. It's better than Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie, or one of those sort of high-end, even better than most of the mysteries I've ever watched. Just the tension it creates. And I think it's better in black and white. And I'll say this because, yes, it's great in the book. I love the book. But it's better in black and white because the moments of tension are filled with this static noise. And that static noise really adds to the awkward pauses. And I like that. I like this very much. I've watched this way too many times to count. It's not available on Criterion. I'm mad at that. But Basil Rathbone's Hounds of the Baskervilles, greatest Sherlock Holmes of all fucking time. This is the quintessential Sherlock Holmes adaptation. And I don't know what y'all, and I'm going to say this once for all you kids out there. Black and white is not wrong. Get over your fucking selves and watch some classics, okay? Just because you don't like it, it means you didn't give it a shot. I'm giving your music a shot with your Justin Biebers and all your nonsense and your EDM house music. You give my black and white a freaking shot because it's awesome. And don't just judge an art by the way it looks. Don't judge by the color. In everything in your life, give it a fucking chance. Okay? Hounds of the Baskervilles. Tyler?
Thank you for saying fuck you to EDM, because I've been saying that for years.
But no, we're giving them a shot. They should give us a shot with our black and white flicks. There's some really good ones. Not all of them, obviously, but give it a shot. Watch some ones that aren't just Casablanca. Go out there and discover it for yourselves. Discover film. Just because you're 18, go out there and discover the film. You can't appreciate the modern films if you don't appreciate the classics. And those classics happen to be in black and white, so deal with it.
Yeah, like, I'm sure you're not the only person who thinks Basil Rathbone was the greatest Sherlock Holmes. I mean, in Great Mouse Detective, they literally named the rat version of Sherlock Basil on Baker Street. So, and last time I checked, there's a scene where, like, there's audio from one of Rathbone's other Sherlock movies when he's trying to sneak out of the house, and you see, like, a silhouette of Sherlock and Watson. So,
very famous.
You're definitely not alone in thinking that Rathbone is one of the best out there. And, yeah, I keep forgetting how many Sherlock Holmes adaptations there are. I always tend to be drawn to the characters that are inspired by Sherlock Holmes, like House or Monk. those are
That's fair.
variations with different twists. Like the big one being House is a medical doctor, and instead of cocaine, he's on Vicodin, and with Monk, he's OCD as opposed to like being on drugs or something like that. And with Monk, he also has an older brother, kind of like Mycroft, who's technically smarter, but is a lot more. In the books, he's a lot more lazy. In Monk, he's agoraphobic and shit like that. So,
I mean, I first watched this a long time ago on PBS, like Saturday or TVO Saturday Night Movies, and I was an 8-year-old kid who just fell in love with this adaptation. Like it captured me from moment one. The way the music flows, the way the dialogue's composed, just the way the actors are in the scene, the facial expressions, everything about this is magic. But anyway, what do you got at number 5 for your best black and white movies of all time?
number 5 is a 2018 movie that I really wish I had gone to the Princess to see, because I'm pretty sure you guys had it for like a limited time only. It was by Alfonso Cuarón. He shot it
Yes.
millimeter black and white because his intention was to see it in theaters, and I'm glad that Netflix at least put it out, because that's the only way streaming movies can get Oscar consideration until this year. It would be great if Spielberg would actually admit that and read the rules, but he didn't. So,
Well, you know how Spielberg feels about the rules, and you know how Quentin Tarantino feels about digital cinematography. Some directors are just who they are.
Yep, and Scorsese and Coppola have been proof of that in recent examples. But for anyone who hasn't guessed already, my number 5 selection is Roma. And I know a lot of people are instantly thinking that if they have seen it, that it might have been one of the most boring movies, most boring things that they have ever seen in their lives, because the majority of the film is our main character, Cleo, just living her life, doing her housework, working alongside the children that she kind of sort of is also a nanny with this one family that she lives with. And on top of that, the personal life that is actually a lot more mundane and a lot less fulfilling than she would like it to be. In fact, the majority of these scenes are shot in very beautiful long takes that Alfonso Cuarón is known for. There are some that are very, very standard by his means, where they're really just a tracking shot to go from left to right, including the finale where Cleo has to go and rescue one of the kids who is supposedly drowning in a beach. And one of the great things that makes that scene more intense is that the real life actress and the character of Cleo did not know how to swim, which makes the long take feel a lot more suspenseful. And it also makes me wonder if there were like first aid medics behind the camera in case something went wrong. I'm really hoping that was.
I bet there were a lot of them.
It's like when I look at guys' grocery games and someone gets cut or whatever, and EMT just appears out of nowhere, and it turns out they're like behind the stage, they're waiting, because that shit really does happen. But in my opinion, the mundane slice of life atmosphere where not a shit ton really happens really serves the arc of Cleo very nicely, because she feels as if her life has gotten so mundane to the point where she's invisible to her coworkers, to her bosses, as well as friends and family in her own life, because the family that she works for is going through their own family crisis where there's a lack of trust between family members. And as opposed to talking about it in a civil way, like most people, they bottle up their emotions. And when anyone questions them, especially Cleo, they tend to get really pissy because they don't know how to deal with it. So she feels as if she's being taken for granted. And in her personal life, this boy that she meets, who kind of becomes fascinated with her, immediately jumps ship afterwards when it's revealed that he doesn't have the same level of commitment and responsibility as she does. So when she starts to ask for one or two very specific things that I won't spoil in case anyone hasn't seen it, he like fucking disappears. She tells him something in a movie theater, and the funny thing is the movie is told from the perspective of a character who's like hard of seeing or like cross-eyed. So the screen goes cross-eyed as soon as he goes, okay. Like it's a very clever foreground and background shot that Cuarón does in his long takes that makes them really stand out. But again, like she feels as if doing the right thing for others as opposed to doing the right thing for herself is starting to blow back on her. But regardless, she knows for a fact that if she gives up, she would only be proving these people right, even though they're technically not even trying to be that way, or at least the family isn't. The boyfriend definitely is, and that final scene really demonstrates that. But what I love about this character study of Cleo is that no matter how hard things get, especially during the riot sequence, she doesn't give up no matter how stressful things get for her. And in the end, she's rewarded for it once her loyalty towards this family during that finale is shown as crystal clear as possible. And something that I noticed when watching stuff like Call Me by Your Name, Roma, Nomadland, the Studio Ghibli movies is that whenever there's a slice of life story, they make the careful decision not to repeat the exact same action in the exact same shot, because when you portray daily life as being mundane and repetitive, you got to find new ways to show it. Otherwise, it's going to get really boring. And in my opinion, Cuarón did an excellent job at that.
Yeah, Alfonso Cuarón is not directed a lot, but every time he directs, whether you love him or hate him, he has a style, he has a presence, he creates exactly what he intends to do. Even with Gravity, as much as I don't love that, the way that is a stylistic movie from beginning to end, and he probably directed a lot of people's favorite, best Harry Potter film, Prisoner of Azkaban, and then also Children of Men is it's a lot, but absolutely in the long shots, as you mentioned there, I don't think this would work as well in color. I think effectively one of the most visual cues he uses is his sound design is always incredibly excellent, and the way he uses the car to signify the beginning and end of scenes, pulling up to the driveway as the family coming and going home, sort of as a transition, is absolutely brilliant. This man is a genius of filmmaking. There's just no other way of saying it. I don't love him, but no denying he's a great director.
I did. I took my sister to see Prisoner of Azkaban when it was re-released in the fall. It is her favorite Harry Potter movie, and it was actually my birthday present towards her, which is usually how it works out. I get her movie tickets as a birthday or Christmas present, and they end up being on her Letterboxd list of favorite movies ever. So
perfect. Yeah, Christmas presents are me. I buy people movies and TV sets. It's just easy for me because I'm like, oh, you like that? It's real easy for me. Or coffee. I buy people coffee for Christmas, but yeah.
I just get people gift cards. I go by the Jeff Dunham and Walter approach, where it's just like, it's the perfect way of saying, here's $20, get your own fucking gift.
But absolute great pick. It did absolutely deserve to win the Oscars for all the stuff it did. I'm glad that it wasn't. What else was nominated that year? My brain is trying to think.
That's a real good question.
Yeah, I'm just gonna look this up. 2018 Oscars, because I'm really curious.
Okay, for like 2018, A Star Is Born was one of the big ones. Everybody thought Sam Elliott was gonna win, and then Mahershala Ali did, because Green Book. That's right. That was the year.
I love Green Book. I know people don't, but whatever.
I like the fact that Arwen from Zack and Cody was the racist waiter, because if you've ever seen Zack and Cody, you know that he's usually the manic loser.
Yeah, what else was nominated that year? Cold War, Vice, The Favorite, Star is Born, bunch of other things. Yeah, of all the ones, like, I don't want to see the typical ones win. If you're a remake of a remake of a remake, you're great, and I'm sure people love you, but give it to something original. That's all I'm saying.
Plus, who can't forget Alfonso Cuarón saying how he grew up with foreign films like Jaws and Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's like the biggest thank you and fuck you to Spielberg for what he was.
Yeah, those are great foreign films.
At least allegedly what he was trying to do. I mean, hey, we're Canadian. That's foreign to us.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, technically, any film made in America is foreign to us if we want to be technical. So
yeah, we're the most accepting and tolerant out of any audience, if we're being honest.
So coming in at my number 5 is one of my personal favorite movies in the horror monster genre. Of all time. 1933's King Kong. You knew it was coming. I absolutely love King Kong. This is a masterpiece in stop motion. This is an advancement in technology. It is cheesy as hell, and it has not aged as well as you'd like. But for me, this was the very first monster movie I ever saw as a kid. So a lot of these movies I connect to, because I watched these and I said, what is that? That is so cool. Because I'd never seen anything like this before. I've never watched a monster movie or a horror movie. I'm 9 years old, sitting on the couch, and CHCH is playing King Kong, and it comes on. And we see Carl trying to make a movie. And I've always wanted to make movies since I was a kid. And he's on a boat, and we see his struggles, and we see Faye Dunaway, sorry, whatever her name is, the actress there. He's like, you know what, we'll get you clothes on the boat, we'll get you there. He's this enthusiastic director just trying to make this film. They're on the boat, they're charting to an island, they don't know where they're going. And he realizes he's got to leave early for a port authority. And we get this brisk 15 minutes of boom, 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 boom. And then we get to the island. And oh my goodness, when we get to the island, this is the stuff. This is the stuff I love. We get to see the people of the island and their culture and the way they worship King Kong, the way they sacrifice a girl, and the power that guns have. And it's sort of like it's an analogy for the way we treat Aboriginals and such. There's a lot of hidden comments in there if you watch the behind the scenes and the commentary. And then we get to go into the jungle. And oh my freaking goodness, I love this. He gets to battle a T-Rex and break his jaw and play with it. There's that nice touch of comedy. We get to see them battle like really giant bugs and such, which I actually think the 2005 King Kong did better. That's the only thing it did better for me, because that bug sequence was phenomenal. We get to see King Kong care for this girl as the first mate just wants to rescue her from a giant ape. We don't get that awkward love scene that Peter Jackson decided 40 minutes of a girl and an ape is a really good idea. That's not a good idea. They're just sitting in the cave and he's caressing her and they're running around and he's killing bats. It's like an awkward date. But in the original, it's very simple, it's very short, and we get the iconic finale with him on the Empire State Building after breaking out, because they decide to put a giant monkey on Broadway and think nothing will ever happen and retell that story. Well, things happened, and he's swatting airplanes, and he falls from the end, and that was the very first line. I'm like, damn, who wrote that line? They're like, whatever, bullets killed him. He's like, no, it was beauty that killed the beast. Then boom! Oh, I love it! It just gets my blood pumping. And people may think it's cheesy, but this is like my monster movie growing up. I grew up with the old Godzillas and the Frankensteins and the Wolfman, but this is the first. This is the first. I like King Kong versus Mechazilla. And even Son of Kong from 1933, the sequel to it, where we get to see Carl back and we have Baby Kong. That one is just as well done. Not as well known, obviously, as the original King Kong. And the special effects are groundbreaking. And if you look up the history of this film, this is the first monster movie on screen. People thought this was actually real for one of the screenings. And people were running out of the theaters until someone was like, no, it's fake. It's a movie. Because motion pictures hadn't evolved and sound was like, oh, you could sing and dance. And it is an iconic film for the technical achievements and for the way it created the monster genre. But it's also an iconic film because I absolutely grew up with this. And whatever your opinions are on this, this is my childhood of monster movies. I owned a copy on DVD at 9 years old, a week after I bought it. Bought it at a little video store in Stratford. You know, it had a Blockbuster sticker on it used, some little thing. I watched this to death.
I'll take your word for it. And yeah, you're absolutely right. One of the best things it's got going for it was just how many filmmaking techniques they practically invented for making this movie. Like the way they combine stop motion with live action, not just by tracing over, but by doing the rear projection or front projection techniques. Stuff that I wish filmmakers would do a lot more often. I think the last time I ever saw anyone do that was that Tom Cruise movie Oblivion, where in the
I like that.
Where in the space station, it wasn't green screened skylines that they were looking at. It was just digitally projected onto the screen, and it made Cruise, and I can't remember the actress who plays his partner's name. It's not Olivia. I know Olga Kurylenko is in it. I don't think she's the love interest, but they do. I did read in interviews just how much they loved that process because they felt right at home with the technique. And I think Christopher Nolan used the same thing with Interstellar, but it's been a long time since I've seen that one.
Olga Kurylenko. She was in Quantum Solace as well, and then also November Man.
That's right. Like she was one of those actresses everybody thought was like going to get bigger, and then she just disappeared. Because like I heard her name a lot in that time
Yeah, she was
period.
also one of the best Bond girls in Quantum of Solace. Regardless of what you think of the movie, it works really well with Casino
Oh,
Royale. But
she's
she was
brilliant.
phenomenal in her character, and it was she had a straight arc, and she wasn't like the love object. She was just there to help Bond out, and I really, really appreciated that. Probably the second best Bond girl because Michelle Yeoh is just so cool.
She is. She
She's the
absolutely
best.
is.
Uh, great job as Chinese intelligence. The more never dies. But I love King Kong. In short,
Yeah, I was about to ask what you thought of the Peter Jackson one, but
I
yeah,
like
that
it. I like it to a certain point. I think the bug sequence they did really well with the special effects in King Kong. I think that was really good on that end. I think it's a little too long. Again, the cave scene's a little awkward. I think I would have liked to see them do something new as opposed to direct remake. I like Jack Black as this filmmaker. I like some of the casting. Adrian Brody's a little dry for me, but
I was gonna
overall it's
say.
very enjoyable, and I've watched it a few times. But for me, it's always about the classic film. I think Peter Jackson did a great job, but you got a lot to live up to. So if you did a good job in my books, I'll take it. It's a pretty great flick, and I'll still watch it. There's just a few elements I think, okay, whatever. You don't need to make this Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, there's that.
I love the island. The way they do the people of the island in that film is just so dark and great. That is on the wall. The way they do the wall and the island and the smoke. It's just yeah.
As quick as possible, a question. What are your thoughts on Kong Skull Island?
I really like Kong Skull Island. I think John C. Riley is great in there. I think it's a different take on it. I mean, King Kong's a different size, obviously, from the original, but they have to match him up to Godzilla. I do think we needed more King Kong. But that's the same thing with Godzilla. But I mean, John C. Riley was great. I really liked Tom Hiddleston did a pretty good job on that, and I'm looking. I liked him in there. He did. It's very interesting. I like the giant stick bug sequence where they think they're in a forest, but it's just that's there's some really cool sequences in there. And I'll even say that the 1976 Jessica Lange King Kong is very interesting. Not my favorite. Jeff Bridges, one of his first movie roles, was in a King Kong movie. And even the 1990 Son. There's another. They did a remake of Son of Kong and such, and I will watch anything King Kong. So, but to me, it's always the classic. I think probably number two in the King Kong for me is definitely King Kong versus Mechagodzilla, just because I love it. Number three, I'd say, is Peter Jackson King Kong. Still like it, just not as much as the original. You know, like I like Peter Jackson's Lord of the Ring over the animated Hobbit and Lord of the Rings films they did back then. Still fun. I like the animated ones, but I prefer the ones that he did because those are a masterpiece. What do you got at your number four?
My number four might lose a lot of people considering this is based on a real life
Hmm.
event that happened and a real life event that took place in Canada, of all places. And I discovered this movie when I was trying to go through every French movie I could of
Hmm.
Denis Villeneuve's leading up to the release
Uh,
of Blade Runner 2049, because I had only seen the stuff that most film nerds have fallen in love with Villeneuve over, with Prisoners, Enemy, Sicario, all great movies by all accounts. But I wanted to see what his Canadian career was like to
mhm.
begin with. His very first movie, August 32nd on Earth, is not a good romantic drama. It's not a sci-fi movie,
Hmm.
despite what the title will make you believe. It's more of a philosophical thing. It's the only movie he's written, let alone written by himself, and yeah, that part really shows. So
I
that was
gotta
my
look
number.
this up, man. I've never heard of it.
And then there was Maelstrom, which is a very bizarre fantasy romantic drama that I'm not kidding is narrated by a fish that keeps dying over and over again.
What is this? A Sega Dreamcast game where Patrick Stewart's a fish?
That would
That's
be
a thing.
great if that were the case, but no. And
That's a
then,
thing for real. So.
well, like as good as Maelstrom is, in my opinion, his best French Canadian movie, which I only say that because I haven't seen Ensemble D yet, he made Polytechnique,
Okay.
which is based off of the Polytechnique École massacre that took place in 1989.
All right. Tell me more. I'm not familiar with this. I'm looking it up now as you tell me.
So, Polytechnique Montreal was and still is an engineering school in Quebec and is apparently considered one of the best. But in 1989, an armed gunman appeared and killed 14 women because he was his motivation was trying to allegedly kill feminists because he was raised by a very misogynistic father. He spent a good amount of time with his mother and sister, and things kind of went really downhill from there. That's the true life story. But, and I can't believe I'm saying this, I did actually watch the movie in certain clips more than once because it somehow had a rewatchable factor while still being as respectful towards victims and survivors of the school as much as possible. And a lot of it comes from the unique way that he directs this movie, and along with his lead actress, who not only was a producer because she had wanted to make this movie for years before he even got involved, which really says something. And I think she helped him secure financing. But what was so interesting was the way they portray the character arcs of the killer, the victims, and the survivors before, during, and after the event. The killer especially has this inner monologue where he is packing up his apartment. His bed is literally a fold-in with a couch. He still does the dishes even though he's never coming back, which gives this visual way of showing that in the end, there was a little bit of potential towards him as a person, and it feels a little bit more tragic that he went this route, but you don't condone or sympathize with what he's going through because his inner monologue, because he doesn't actually speak in this, is literally his real life suicide note. And I found that out by accident. It was almost quoted exactly verbatim, listing why he was so misogynistic and anti-feminist. He's just like, oh, well, why are soldiers and nurses being declared as frontline heroes when women weren't even allowed on there? And it's just like, you're pointing out a thing of sexism that should be addressed, and you're using it as an excuse. There's like a lot of there. The thing is, like, he's one of the very few killers like this who had a clearly established motivation, because there are other killers like this who we still don't know years later why they did, but they make it clear what the motivation is, and you understand why he feels this way without ever sympathizing with him. And it definitely helps that throughout the entire movie, he's never happy. He never smiles at anything. So they really emphasize the pointlessness of this entire quote unquote mission. But what was really interesting about the character arcs of the survivors and the victims was that you do get to see the aftermath. There are so many movies that take place in settings like this where it just focuses on the event from beginning, middle, and end. And it's really just a recap of stuff that we had already seen, but it feels a lot more emotionally impactful just to see the events unfold that way, kind of like with Gus Van Sant's Elephant, which this movie gets compared to a lot. And I don't really think it's warranted because, again, they do focus on the aftermath. We don't just get a perspective of the female survivors. We get the perspective of a male who was told to exit the class because there's a big scene where the killer goes into a classroom, demands all the guys leave and all the women stay. And I don't think I have to tell you what happens next, but we see this guy like run like crazy. He doesn't blurt out that there's a mad gunman because everyone can go crazy. They can get caught in the crossfire, all this shit. He goes to the security desk and very urgently demands them to call 911. And without even waiting for them to see if they do, he starts running around. He sees if anyone's in trouble. And yet, at the very end of the movie, there's a scene of him in a car going through this build complex where I won't say what it is, but even though he technically made an effort to do something, in the end, people still got killed and he's alive because since he's a guy, one could really easily assume that he was in no real danger. And we get to see him struggle with such a sympathetic way. But the big scene stealer was the main survivor trying to struggle with very conflicting beliefs. There's an inner monologue where she says, everyone tells me how strong I am, but I don't want to be strong. I want to curl up. And it's just like, you can instantly understand what she's going through. But at the same time, she also is really afraid. She knows she doesn't have faith in people anymore. And she knows that's a really bad place to be in because while this event did teach her that there's a lot more hatred in the world than we give it credit for, there are a lot of people who are still good and upstanding regardless. And she knows she has to hang on to it, which is why she writes this letter to someone who she knows for a fact isn't going to read it. But if she doesn't write it, she's not going to be able to take the next step forward.
I looked at the cinematography on this looks incredible. The way he frames the shots, just I was looking at the downward shot of like the classroom and the way they're all sitting there by the photocopiers, and just even the close-ups, just the sort of left alignment he has for all of this, where they're sort of on the left but not the right, the way he's framing them as the victims and sort of something to come. And then I noticed that in all the frames, the killer are on the right and the victims are on the left, and I find that very, very interesting. It looks amazing.
Yeah, the direction also feels very unique from real life true stories about terror attacks like this. Usually they're very gritty and handheld, but what was so gritty about this one was not just the black and white photography, which Villeneuve attributes to not wanting to show the amount of blood on victims, which I don't really think he accomplished, because there's one shot where inevitably the shooter takes his own life, and there's a point where his blood like soaks into the last person he shot. And like you can interpret that shot in a variety of ways. It kind of looked like a Rorschach test the way it was framed,
Okay.
but I like the way, as opposed to just like holding the camera on your shoulder in a handheld fashion, it feels like an Emmanuel Lubezki cinematography for like a Terrence Malick movie, where it's on a steady cam, but it's constantly like teetering back and forth to give you that unease, but it's still like as locked in as possible, just to show the amount of destruction that's going on. I love the fact that they kind of visualize just how people wouldn't have been able to hear these gunshots because of how vast and huge this school was. I actually looked up that this very school in question gave them permission to shoot, but the director, but the director still said no, because it's just like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah,
So
no, that's a smart move.
yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I give the school credit for being incredibly brave about it, because by the time this movie came out, it had been 20 years. But I mean, needless to say, the amount of emotional turmoil didn't stop people from getting upset. And it's one of the few times where you don't really agree with them getting upset, but at the same time, it's just like, wouldn't you be if you were in the exact same
This
position?
gives me Munich vibes. Am I wrong? Am I right?
I haven't actually seen Munich, so I can't really for sure. But
Good enough. Well, I added it to my IMDb watch list, so I'm going to go find this movie.
But yeah, it's one of those true life stories that still has like an overall arc, and that arc is how some people have the strength to heal over certain tragedies, and some of them certainly don't. Whether you're a survivor or, in this case, the perpetrator, who doesn't even go by the name. They don't even give this guy the benefit of like giving him an actual name to look up, which I find weird because it's called Polytechnique. People are going to look it up anyways, but I get what they were going with. It's just like, we're not going to give you attention. We're just going to say why you did it, and that's really all there is to it.
Yeah, that sounds phenomenal. So my number 4, I hope you've heard of this movie, and I hope you've seen this movie. 1949's White Heat. Have you heard of it, Tyler?
I have not, but do tell.
Have you heard the phrase, made it ma, top of the world?
I think so, yeah.
So this is the 1949 James Cagney flick, directed by Ruel Walsh, who started his career in 1913 directing vaudeville all the way up to the late 50s. So White Heat is James Cagney probably at his best as a gangster. As much as I love Angels with Dirty Faces, Roaring Twenties, White Heat, Petrified Forest, all these things, White Heat is definitely the cream of the crop. This is James Cagney playing a gangster. Surprise, surprise, this man plays a lot of gangsters. But seriously, if you haven't seen The Petrified Forest, Humphrey Bogart, James Cagney, both early performances, it's incredible. You really have to check it out. It's a crime thriller up there with Goodfellas level of quality. Side note.
Speaking of James Cagney, isn't he the original Scarface guy?
He is no, that's Edward G. Robinson. Actually, fun story about the original. I was actually thinking about Edward G. Robinson's film because they're also incredible. My sister was really into gangster films, so old Hollywood, I got into them. But Scarface, the original Scarface, I prefer definitely to whatever that one in the 80s was, because it's an hour and 40 minutes, and it cuts out all the pulp and the random character moments where they're getting girls. It's literally a lesson in violence. They banned gangsters from having any guns bigger than a pistol in movies because of the original Scarface. It's iconic because of that. It's phenomenal, and the shootout scenes, it's brutal. It's honestly one of those violent 30s movies ever made. But White Heat, we start off with James Cagney basically robbing the mail train for bail bonds, and now he has to hide from the law, and that's our setup for the movie. And the movie is very, very interesting because, like, other gangster movies sort of show the violence and this is a character piece. This is him torn between his girlfriend, played by Virginia Mao, and his mother, Margaret Wishero. I think I pronounced that wrong. He is deeply in love with his girlfriend, but he has a very, very strong allegiance, a sort of Norman Bates relationship with his mother, but his mother is still alive. He is devoted to her 100%, but he's also devoted to his girlfriend at the time too as well. And he's got the money and he's got to hide it, and basically it's the FBI and other gangsters trying to track him down. And I don't want to spoil too much because it really is an emotional climax for this whole movie. Basically watching this whole man's life being torn apart, and when one of the key figures in his life is no longer there, he goes on a massive revenge tour, and it ends with this big factory fight and the shootout with the government and the officials, and he gets up on top of this giant vat of chemicals, and he says, "Made it, Ma! Top of the world!" And just massive explosion, and blows everyone to hell with him. And I'm like, holy crap, what a movie! Oh my goodness, if you have not seen White Heat, it's a master in action. It's a master in character development. It's a love triangle between a mother and your girlfriend and this basically man-child, and different types of love, obviously. But it is a masterpiece in filmmaking. And the director here has done nothing else that you will have heard of except for a couple of James Cagney films. And most of the people in this film, Fred Clark is the only one who played a supporting role, went on to do Sunset Boulevard. But, I mean, the rest of them, but it is absolutely a classic. This is the one that they play on Turner Classic Movies or AMC on repeat, and they do that for a reason, because it's well written, it's well produced, the music just feels like it's the 1930s, you're in a gangster flick, and it gives you the emotional highs and lows. I highly recommend this movie. I cannot tell you how much you should watch this movie. Yeah, watch White Heat. You won't regret it. It's phenomenal. It's probably, I would say, it's better than some Scorsese gangster flicks. Absolutely. It's the gangster flick that Scorsese would have been inspired by. He would have watched this and said, I should make that movie. And you can really tell because the fingerprints and the identity and a lot of... It reminds me a lot of some of the scenes. There's a few scenes in there that I just feel like Scorsese ripped right out and put in The Irishman. So, definitely inspired Scorsese, and it helped him. There's a lot of Goodfella vibes in there, and Scarface vibes you see in the 80s, and just a lot of these all the gangster flicks. This is the one that came before it that inspired it. Because as much as people will look to The Petrified Forest or Tropicana or a couple of these other flicks, or even Angels with Dirty Faces, which is incredibly iconic. Angels with Dirty Faces, if you don't know, is basically what they're making fun of in Home Alone with the Keep the Change, You Filthy Animal. They're mocking or paying homage to Angels with Dirty Faces. But probably the most iconic and most important gangster film to watch. Probably the first one you should ever watch, so you can understand where we came from.
Why is it that gangsters have to have unhealthy obsessions with their mother and their girlfriend? I really don't understand.
Good question. I just know it's a great movie.
I'll take your word for it. White Heat.
White Heat. Watch this movie. You won't be disappointed. I'm sure it'll show up on your Turner Classic Movies or AMC one of these days.
Well, I'd have to have Turner Classic Movies in order to be able to do that.
You know what I mean? You know, they're playing Saving Private Ryan or something. This is another one they'll play on repeat. So.
I know, but I don't have the Turner Classic channel, unfortunately.
Oh, well, you know what I mean. You can. I'm sure they put it. I don't know if they got to put it on a streaming service somewhere. But older movies, people don't watch on streaming services really. So all you get is like crappy John Wayne westerns, unless you subscribe to Criterion.
Well, my number 3, I'm amazed was even on any streaming services because it's a silent movie.
Oh, Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton.
It is a Charlie Chaplin movie, and while I can't say it's my favorite silent movie, my favorite silent movie would actually be the Wild Bunch Studios Studio Ghibli collaboration that is The Red Turtle.
I thought you were going to say Silent Movie by Mel Brooks.
No, but that would be a good one too. But yeah, my favorite silent movie to come out of the silent era is actually Charlie Chaplin's final film as the Little Tramp,
Mm.
Modern.
Oh, that is. Oh my goodness, that's a solid pick. You could not go wrong with that.
Oh, not at all. And like the funny thing
Phenomenal.
is, I had never actually seen a silent movie from the silent era before having checked it out. There were others that I could have went for, like City Lights, which a lot of people consider one of his best, and it was his
Yeah, it's
second last, I believe. But I really wanted to see if it was true that Charlie Chaplin's gift at physical comedy, his timing, delivery, and his commitment to the stunt work was just as impressive as everybody said. Because we've all seen video essays of like how visual comedy is kind of a lost art and how the originals were the ones who had done it best because they didn't have the tools that we have now. And you know what? They were absolutely true. The imaginative scenarios that Charlie Chaplin puts the tramp in, where there are so many times he just makes an innocent but still very clumsy mistake that gets him and a lot of other people either hurt or in trouble. And all he has is that very innocent, sorry smile that I really loved about him. Like when he walks into like a socialist or communist rally by accident, and when everyone runs away, he's just like, hey, what's going on? And the cop walks up to him and he just goes, what did I do? Which really fits the themes in them very nicely because it takes place during the middle of the Great Depression. There were all those socioeconomic struggles where businesses were replacing human labor with machines. There was a lot more emphasis on materialism, stuff that I would point out still happens nowadays, but everybody points that out every 5 minutes. So there's really no point. Plus, with Parasite, they pretty much have done the exact same thing. So the whole debate over what's great or bad about capitalism is still going on right now. I don't really buy into the anti-capitalist stuff myself, but I still like anti-capitalist movies. Kind of like how Alicia Malone, a vegetarian, just loves the hell out of cannibal horror movies.
she did like Raw very much.
I think it's one of her. It might be one
Yeah.
of her new favorites. A friend of mine that reminds me so much of Alicia.
Is she doing something? It's been a minute since I see what she was doing. What is
Yeah,
Elise doing?
it's just such a weird comparison. But what's so great about the themes and the more dramatic aspects about Modern Times, because it really is more of a comedy drama as opposed to a straight up comedy, is that Chaplin at the end of the day still approaches the themes and subject matter in a more lighthearted, optimistic way. No matter how many times the tramp gets down on his luck, or this orphan girl who is played very well by Paulette Goddard, no matter how many times the two of them hit rock bottom, they still get up, they still try and work as hard or harder than they did before in order to achieve some level of success or stability in their life. That was what made the chemistry between the two of them work so genuinely. It was what made that final shot just so emotionally impactful and iconic. I think it has one of the best movie endings ever just by emphasizing those themes in particular. I forget what I was about to say next, but
That's okay.
oh, that's right. Whenever I think of the ending, whenever I think of Modern Times in particular, I also think about the fact that Charlie Chaplin was one of the few directors who actually composed his own music. And he's the
Yes.
one who gave us the Nat King Cole, Jimmy Durante hit Smile, because that song was technically an orchestration for this very movie. But when Nat King Cole was starting to get big, some people took Chaplin's music and they applied lyrics to it so that Cole and eventually Durante can sing it. And now it has become synonymous with the Joker as its unofficial theme song. And ironically, Joker actually features a sequence where he is breaking into a charity movie screening in order to get close to the Wayne family. But when he's dressed as an usher, he stops to admire Modern Times playing in the background because that's actually the movie that they were showing up at. He sees this loser who is down on the dumps, is disregarded by society, something that the Joker can relate to, and laughs along with his pain during that roller skating sequence in the mall that is just so hilarious. But also, Todd Phillips, the writer and director, uses the comparisons, whereas the tramp approaches life with such an optimistic attitude and does whatever he can to help himself and others. There's the Joker who takes these frustrations and just uses it as an excuse to supposedly discipline anyone who ever did him wrong. He doesn't discipline people because he thinks the world would be a better place. It makes him feel better. So that's just a minor side note that I really like about the comparisons. But yeah, Modern Times, in my opinion, is one of the smartest silent movies ever made because it has social commentary that's elevated by the humor and the emotional stakes. Paulette Goddard's arc got a little non-existent after a while because she has a pre-established family at the beginning, and then once she hooks up with the tramp, it kind of just goes away and you never hear about it again. But outside of that, I had a really good time. I laughed my ass off just because the silent comedy is just as, if not funnier, than the stuff that we get now.
1936 was Modern Times. I just needed to know the copyright date.
Of course you did.
I was just wondering, yeah. No, Charlie Chaplin definitely deserves to be on a list of any black and white. I was really wanting to put a Buster Keaton on here, but there's just so many, and I couldn't bring myself to choose because Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, all these people have so many iconic stunts in films. Whether it's Charlie Chaplin's little mustache twig, or his twirl, or whatever you want to call that, or his cane, or him with the tramp, or even Buster Keaton with the house falling on him or hanging off a clock, just 100% iconic. Harold Lloyd. Yeah, but great stuff regardless. I watched all this stuff as a kid because I could.
Yeah, and you can Jackie Chan, Keanu Reeves, and Tom Cruise kind of emulating that exact same style whenever they do more comedic stuff. Because the great thing about Mission Impossible is that some of the stunts are very comedic. Mission Impossible 3 in particular, that like building jump that Ethan goes through reminded me of a Jackie Chan stunt, which inherently Jackie Chan got off of Keaton, Chaplin, and Lloyd because he loved their physical into the comedy. So it's great to say that they've had a long-lasting impression, not just on comedy, but just on movie making in general.
I do think that there is, there's a disconnect between people watching modern comedies and watching old comedies, because all these comedians, I bet even Seth Rogen was inspired by Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin, because he's got to get some of his chops or something from there, or even the Marx Brothers with the witty dialogue, but there's got to be some inspiration that's come from definitely the older comedians, for sure.
Well, in Seth Rogen's case, I can see Marx Brothers because they do have a very fast-paced delivery, and that's the one thing I can say about Rogen. I don't really know if he's a physical comedian per se. Like, I know a lot of his movies have slapstick in them, but he's not really on the receiving end. So,
and definitely Peter Sellers got a lot of his stunts from. Peter Sellers is heavily inspired by these guys for sure. He does make them his own, but definitely a master of the arts. I would love to see Peter Sellers, Chico, and just Charlie Chaplin all in the same room having a conversation. That would be. Everyone's doing Marilyn Monroe and like James Dean, but where is the poster of all these three silent guys just doing something together, playing pool or having a drink? You know?
Yeah. I married your mother because I wanted children. Imagine my disappointment when you arrived.
So my number 3 is going to be no surprise, actually. It's a Marx Brothers film. It's A Day at the Races from 1937. This is Groucho Marx saving a sanitarium for Margaret Dumont's character, who runs a business there, and he treats her, and it's very, very silly. If you've seen a Marx Brothers films, you know what to expect. There's going to be a musical sequence. There's going to be a harp, but the way they get to the harp in this film, so Harpo's sitting there playing the piano, and he's playing it, and it's falling apart, and the sides are coming off, and the keys are popping out and flying up. So he rips out the middle of the piano and starts playing the harp, and a choir comes in the background. It's great. This is the movie where Groucho is at the races, and he wants to know about horses, and Chico just looks at him and he's like, you know, if you want to be real good at this horse racing thing, you got to buy the Breeder's Guide. He's like, no, I don't need the Breeder's Guide. He's like, well, let me get you the Breeder's Guide. He's like, it's only $5, but I'll do 5 for 1 or 1 for 5 or 5 for 7. And he's going on, he's riffing, and he's like, you know what, I'll take it. So he gives him the guide, and he takes the money that he gets. He walks over. He's like, yeah, put all this money on 33. And he walks back and he's like, well, there's just names in here, but there's no table of contents. He's like, well, you got to get the table of contents in this other. But he's like, well, tell you what, why don't I just buy the whole kick and boodle and I'll have all the books. And he's like, done, great. It's just, and then there's this sequence where the medical professionals are like, well, we don't believe you're a doctor, and they do the whole they do the whole shtick, and they're like, well, we're going to treat her. That's why we have the sanitarium here. We're going to save her. We're going to treat her. He's like, Dr. Frank. Oh, here's another Dr. Frank. And coincident, you're Dr. Frank. Chico Harpo, they're all Dr. Franks. And he's like, well, let's examine the patient. Well, we have to wash our hand first. We have to be sanitary. You should know that as a doctor. And they all go wash their hands. She's like, now we have to examine the patient. So, oh, you touched the patient. Now we have to wash our hands again. You got to watch it twice. It's just absolute nonsense. And I love this. What is my favorite quote from here? Dr. Hackenbush played. He's like, at the age of 15, I got a job at a drugstore filling prescriptions. And he's like, don't you have to be 20 to fill prescriptions? He's like, that's for grown-ups. I only just fill them for children.
Oh my god.
And then he's like, Emily, I have a confession to make. I'm really a horse doctor, and marry me, and I'll never look at another horse. Like, it's so dumb and witty. And
Was this pre-code? Because this sounds pre-code.
Pre what?
Like the stupid Hays Code or whatever that...
Oh, I don't know. She's in love with me. She doesn't know anything. That's why she's in love with me.
Is it true you're getting a divorce as soon as your husband recovers his eyesight? I know
And
it's
he-
not from the...
And I mean, in another one, he'll be like, come up to my place. Better what? I'll come up to your place, and then I'll go to your place, and then we'll go back to my place, and it'll be great. We'll spend the whole evening together, maybe the whole week. Oh my goodness. This movie is absolute nonsense from beginning to end. It has these witty dialogue. If you're not into like witty old school comedy, you're not gonna get it. But for me, this is probably some of my favorite Marx Brothers gags. As much as I love Coconuts with the really long cigarette, or Duck Soup with the musical sequences, or any of these, this one just makes me laugh really, really hard. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but I love it. Day at the Races.
Well, whenever we say a comedy makes no sense nowadays, everyone just goes, oh, well, that's the point. Oh, sure. But when an older movie, that's when shit gets hard to follow.
And I will end on my favorite quote of the movie. Either he's dead or my watch stopped. It's so dumb. I've heard a lot of great things about you. Yeah, I've heard a lot of great things. What is that line? He's like, there's one thing I want to know about you. What do you do with the razors when you're done with your beard? And he's got a long, pointy beard. It's like, excuse me? And he's like, well, you shave the beard he's like, I do not shave my beard. It grows naturally. And and he's like, well, what do you do with the razors? I don't even know. It's so dumb. I love it. I love the Marx Brothers.
I like this wordplay. It really sounds good. Wow.
It's all wordplay. This movie is less physical and more wordplay. Still got some great physical gags, like A Night at the Opera or Casablanca. Their Casablanca comedy, A Night at Casablanca. It has the best suitcase gag of all time, where one guy's packing up things and the other guy's unpacking it, and this guy hiding in the suitcase to throw it out. And it's complete nonsense. The mirror sequence in Duck Soup is absolutely magical. But oh my goodness, if you have not watched a Marx Brothers film, go watch one. Watch Duck Soup. It's the most approachable. That's all I'm saying.
Well, you said you'd loan me your copy of those, but
Yeah.
that's not happened yet.
We haven't seen each other lately. COVID and all. So
Weird, because last time you were at my house, it was to drop off shit. Like
that's true. I dropped off the poster you won.
That too, which was The Red Turtle, my favorite silent movie.
Yeah. So that's my number 3. What do you got for your number 2 here? We're getting down to the nitty gritty. I'm excited.
My number 2 was originally going to be Parasite Black and White for the exact same reasons that I mentioned why I didn't put it on there. And there were a couple others that I could have went with, like Mad Max Fury Road Black and Chrome, which I think really, because that's George Miller's preferred vision of the movie, which I find really weird, because the downside to Mad Max Fury Road Black and Chrome is that we have seen it in color. We know how awesome it is to look at those bright orange deserts and the huge, almost neon flames every time like the guitar guy lights up his guitar, or there's a huge explosion and there's this burst of color. And then in Black and Chrome, you don't really get any of that. So even though the action scenes are still just as awesome, they don't feel as exciting for that reason, which is another reason why it didn't make it onto this list. But for me, even though this film technically has the same problem in Black and White, Logan Noir has so many scenes where the black and white just looks instantly better. The main thing that I noticed with the black and white is that it emphasizes each character's feeling of isolation and loneliness in such a significantly better way. In the colorized version, it really came down to the fact that it had that Western atmosphere where everything was vast and empty, as if there was really no one to talk to. Or whenever they were in Vegas or amongst that one family they have dinner with, it's more of a claustrophobic sense where they want to admit what they're really going through, but because they're mutants and they have much different life experiences, not only are these family members or the people in Vegas not going to understand, they're instantly going to fear them and try to kill them. But in the black and white, they are just shrouded in shadows and silhouettes in an otherwise brightly lit location where they feel so isolated by emphasizing on the flaws and the violence that they've inflicted on others in their past times. Or, and this was something that I really love, whenever there's a single shot of Logan or these lost boys that Laura is trying to reconnect with, they'll be brightly lit, and they have this like whitish gray look where they're starting to redeem themselves, but the background is pitch black. It's almost like they're filmed against a black wall to really emphasize that they're outsiders. They're completely all alone in their feelings, and they have absolutely no one else to turn to. Even the villains, who still are very thinly written, especially for comic book villains, and that is technically the big problem with Logan as a movie, they're a lot more intimidating based on the amount of shadows and silhouettes that are cast upon them. Or Boyd Holbrook, who has what looks like an all-black uniform as he's chasing and hunting down these children, as opposed to Richard E. Grant, the scientist, who's got a little more of a white or gray look because his morals are a lot more gray. He's the one who released that virus to supposedly contain mutant kind, but at the expense of making it near extinct. Now, the one downside, as I said, with all of these other movies is that because we have seen Logan in color, the really gritty and over the top violence doesn't hit the exact same effect, because the blood and guts are actually kind of hidden by the higher contrast, which I find really interesting. But at the same time, it doesn't change the fact that the fight choreography, the stunt work, especially by Daphne Keane and her stunt double, who was the exact same age as her. I've seen videos of her as like a gymnast in competitions, and she is really damn good. That stuff all goes to show the special effects actually blend in a lot more seamlessly because of that higher contrast. We're not too busy looking at where the CGI of Logan's claws are like cutting off in regards to the rendering. It actually looks like it's blended into their skin. It makes the de-aging effects on Hugh Jackman as X-24 also a lot more authentic, which is weird because X-24 is one of the few times where de-aging someone and putting them in the exact same frame as their actual selves, that's one of the few times where it actually looked authentic in color, let alone in black and white. So it's a very straightforward pick as my number two, because not a lot of it has changed. The character arcs are still really well done. The action is fantastic. James Mangold did a really good job of making this more of a road trip Western that has action sequences as opposed to a straightforward superhero movie. But the scenes that look better in black and white are more than worth it for me personally. I'm glad that I have it on Blu-ray. I've watched it a few times and it looks fantastic.
I've only watched it once in black and white, but I enjoyed it very much. I did not notice as much as you, but I just put it on my honorable mentions as we previously stated. But great little flick, whether you're watching in color or black and white. Probably, I'm going to say this, my second favorite X-Men movie, because X2 is still so cool. I like X2.
X2 is cool. Like, there are some things about it that I don't think hold up a ton, mainly like the other X-Men characters who are either so cool but don't get utilized, or the ones that are completely overemphasized. Cyclops.
Yeah, I love X2 and I love Logan and that. Those are about Logan. Did it win Best Screenplay at the Oscars?
It was nominated for Best Adapted, which I thought was weird. I was really rooting for Daphne Keane to get like Best Supporting Actress, because like they were campaigning for her, and like, wouldn't that have been great?
It would have been great, but it's the Oscars and they don't think superhero movies are movies.
Yeah, but like here's the thing, like they've nominated and have given awards to kids in the past, and the fact that like they gave Abigail Breslin a nomination for Little Miss Sunshine, and the fact that
Sure.
Logan takes inspiration from Little Miss Sunshine not just as a road trip movie but as a family drama, and she's very much similar to the Olive character in Little Miss Sunshine. I felt like she had a chance. Plus, that was the year where kid performances in 2017 were really good.
What
Her
else?
and the Nova girl from War for the Planet of the Apes, who
Oh, yeah, yeah.
did a really good job.
Oh, yeah, okay. That 2017 was a little while back, so.
Oh, and don't forget that was 2017 too. Tons
Ah,
of great performances,
fair enough. Yeah, I like Logan.
and that's 2017 too.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's a cute movie. What year was, oh, never mind, I'm thinking of a different movie. My number two is not going to surprise you at all. Not in any capacity.
Just say it, man.
Perhaps the greatest movie about the working class people, Clerks. Have you seen it?
Of course, I've seen it. It's fucking Clerks. I'm not even a Kevin Smith guy, and I can appreciate it.
So, Kevin Smith directed Clerks. He made it for, what, $27,000, sold his comic book collection, maxed out 5 credit cards, shot it in black and white on film in the 90s, and then it launched his career to where he got to make this ridiculous bunch of films. And it all started with Clerks. Dante is on his day off, comes in because his boss doesn't want to be there. His buddy works at the video store next door. He's having trouble with his girlfriend. His high school sweetheart is back in town, and there's a salsa shark. That's the movie. It's phenomenal. Jay and Silent Bob are selling drugs outside there. This movie is, if you've ever worked in retail or any place where you're customer service, you get it. I mean, the one moment, there's a ton of great moments, but the pack of cigarettes where the guy's talking and he's like, no, buy this gum, and he's representative and he's getting everyone riled up is a great moment. I mean, the guy was like, why is this coffee hot? I mean, the guy in the video store. Do you have the one with the guy who was in The Thing last year? It's just absolute nonsense. They play street hockey on the roof and close the store, and everyone wants to buy stuff. He sells cigarettes to an underage kid without knowing, and then a guy comes in and charges him later. He's like, were you here at 3:45? Yep. Did you? Great, here's your fine. He's not even supposed to be here today! Like, it's a very relatable movie, and his best friend is a dick. His best friend is... He's like, what do you think's better, Empire or Jedi? And he's like, I don't know, I like Jedi. And he's like, well, I always thought it was unfair for the service workers, the metal workers and the pipers, and it's just a real good, quick government job. And he's like, and then the guy's like, well, I'm actually a roofer, and you got to think your politics, because I was offered a job on this gangster's house, and my buddy did it, and a week later he's dead because of the hit. You got to think politics. I don't blame the people on the Death Star. You signed up for that. It's nonsense. He's sitting behind the counter with his girlfriend during work hours. This movie is one of my absolute favorites, not just because it's relatability, but because it's really funny and it's paced really well. Jay and Silent Bob are some of my favorite movie characters of all time because they're just so dumb. And I love these guys. They stand outside the Quickie Mart with a sign that says, I assure you're open, or whatever the thing's called. I don't know.
I don't know. The fact that anyone can say Quickie Mart nowadays, yeah.
All I know is I love this movie. I really love Salsa Shark.
I always love the line where he just goes, dude, there's a million fine looking women in the world, but they don't give you lasagna at work. Most of them just cheat on you.
And then Silent Bob dropping truth,
I love that in Chasing Amy, they throw in that referential thing where he's just like, this asshole thinks he's smart every time he does open his fucking mouth. Jesus Christ, why don't you shut up?
Randall is an idiot too. I mean, Randall's like, people say crazy shit during sex. One time this girl called me mom. You hate people, but I love gatherings. Isn't it ironic?
Hey, try not to suck any dick on the way to the parking lot.
And the guy dies in the washroom.
while the girl is fucking
Giving
him.
him, yeah, it's well, the girl's giving him head or whatever, and I'm like, what? Yeah, I don't even know. And they're like, yeah, this movie is awesome.
I feel so bad for Kevin Smith having to get like an hour of sleep per day, like working at that store and then like spending the entire night filming at it. And the fact that he incorporated the stupid gum on the locks because like it's technically nighttime, hence the black and white, which is just an even better reason for more black and white movies to be made. It's not just more stylistic and you can get away with that. Like it's a great way to hide the fact that what you're shooting is technically not really happening.
It's also a movie you couldn't get away with now because they do a lot of things that wouldn't be socially acceptable. So I'm glad this was made before these things
well,
happened.
We did just emphasize that a few seconds ago.
Yeah, and I mean, even Clerks 2, I wish they did Clerks 2 in black and white and sort of kept it in its own universe, but they all sort of interconnected. But I'm not mad at Clerks 2. It's a really, really funny movie, but it is inappropriate at times, yes. And Rosario Dawson in Clerks 2 is phenomenal in that role.
Clerks 2?
Yeah, in Clerks 2, she's Dante's fiancée, and they all work at the Mobies. So, and they're all sitting there, and I mean, Randall literally patronizes this kid for liking Transformers and it not being, godly because it stands for like demons or something. Oh my goodness, it's great. And like Ben Affleck's in that one, and I don't know, like, oh, it's so funny. And we're forgetting the funeral sequence in Clerks. What a ridiculous sequence! Like, why? I don't know. They just do it. It's only one day, too. That's the genius of it. It's one day in his life. It's literally all the way till the end. And, like, honestly, the girl he has is amazing, like you're mentioning. But, like, he wants to get with the girl that's like all the other girls. And this is a reoccurring theme you find in Mallrats and all these other things. There's always the better girl out there, but the one that you have is honestly the best fit for you. You just can't see it. And, yeah, I love Silent Bob and Jay in this. It's just, oh my goodness, it's phenomenal. This could be, I think this is Kevin Smith's best movie because when he has creative vision, it's either 100% the best or way out there and you're like, okay. But what a great debut. This might be one of the greatest debut films of all time.
Probably, yeah. Like, I see this so often as being one of those cult movies that people who like it consider it one of the absolute best, kind of like Little Miss Sunshine, which I'm starting to see more and more of lately. But yeah, it's totally warranted, and the amount of pain in the ass of a process of making this movie as it was totally worth it.
Well, I mean, I can relate. When I shot Saving Grace, which I've been re-editing and hopefully will be out when it's out, but I'm taking my time making sure it's real good. The debut was just for family and friends, obviously. I worked literally 8-hour shifts, did my thing, slept for 4 hours, and did this for a week and a half. Like, straight up, that's what I was doing. I was putting my own money into it. I maxed out. I get where this guy's coming from. When it comes out, we'll see if it's worth it, because, I'm having trouble with some sound sections because that air conditioner I can't get rid of, but we're going to put it out regardless because I spent a lot of money on that, and, yeah, I love Kevin Smith.
You're right about the customer service aspect of it. Like, I'm one of the few people who have been in a career where I don't actually address my customers, but that actually makes it a little bit more frustrating because their complaints are just words, and they're like faceless people that I can't go up to, which just makes it a hell of a lot worse. It's just like,
yeah,
I go on, but if I get too specific, that's the world.
Well, I mean, I'll give you my favorite customer complaint without putting names or faces to it. Person comes up to counter, says, I'd like to pay for a movie. I'm like, okay, debit or cash? We take debit or cash. He's like, well, I pay with credit card. I'm like, well, we don't take credit card. We're an indie cinema, whatever, yada, yada. He's like, what do you mean you don't take credit card? I'm like, well, I mean, I can't take credit card because it doesn't work. And he's like, what do you mean you don't take credit cards? I'm like, well, it means, sir, that you can't pay with your credit card. He's like, every other business around here that's credible, that gets any business, pays with credit card, as well as debit and cash, and I want the points for my credit card. And I'm just like, well, I can't take it, so I don't know what I can do for you. And beside him, the whole time, his wife is turning red in the face, like, what are you doing? You're embarrassing me. There's a line behind him, people are starting to snicker, and I'm like, I can't take credit card. I mean, you can go to an ATM, and I'm just like, I don't know how to help you. I'm not angry. I'm not trying to get you upset, but I can't take it.
There's literally an ATM 5 steps from you
Yeah,
now.
and I'm like, I can't. You can go. He's like, oh, I want to pay with my credit card. I'm like, I can't do that. Next, and he's like, and the wife just taps, and he's just losing his mind. He's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I can't do nothing, man. This is what I'm just doing my job, okay? And I'm standing there with my coworker, and we're just like, it's a credit card. And my thought was, something pissed this guy off. One of his relative dies, or his coffee was like had a bug in it in the morning. So I'm not gonna get too mad at this guy. Anyway, what's your number one?
Well, in the greatest shift from comedy to tragedy ever in our videos.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
Yeah.
Did I tell you about my dead cousin? No, just kidding. That's a joke from 2012.
My number one is a movie based on a book that I actually read in high school, and it ended up being the best thing that I had ever read. But the very interesting thing was, it was a book that I checked out from the library as opposed to one I was being given to assign. I could not believe the fact that this was actually in our school library, given the context of the subject matter. But it was all the more reason for me to check it out. And after a week, I couldn't put it down, because To Kill a Mockingbird is not only one of the best books I've ever read, which is insane because I'm not an avid reader at all, but it's also one of the best adaptations out there, because the thing the book and the movie have in common is that the characters are just so likable and relatable, and you can understand and identify with everything they're saying within a given moment. And in the movie's case, it is all thanks to the performances, especially Gregory Peck as Atticus Finch, one of, if not the best movie heroes ever, to the point where the AFI Awards, I'm pretty sure, might have put him as number one for pretty much everything that makes him such a great character. I love the fact that when he's talking about his job and the circumstances that he has to deal with Tom's trial, is that he addresses his kids, Scout and Jem, as if they're equals, as if they're adults, especially with the fact that he actually lets them call him Atticus as opposed to calling him dad or father, which just goes to show how much they respect him intellectually as an individual, let alone as a parent. He speaks to them with intelligence, grace, and respect about the subject matter, especially with the fact that there are no easy answers as to why the hatred and bigotry that they're experiencing exists. But when he's addressing the court in that fantastic monologue during his final statement, or when he's cross-examining the victim's family, when it becomes incredibly clear that they're hiding something specific relating to that incident, he talks down to them like they are children in need of a lesson to be scolded. And if by some chance they do not or will not get the message, he simply addresses them as politely as possible, because he knows for a fact if he snaps, if he starts calling them names, not only will he lose any credibility that he has in this case, but he'll be just as bad, if not worse, as the people he is criticizing. And that's the thing that makes him such a complex but still very inspirational hero. His daughter, Scout, who is essentially the central character, is a really good main character, because the confusion and contradictions of racism are so confusing that seeing it through the mind of a child, let alone a child who's not even 10 years old, doesn't really understand half the stuff that's going on, really works well. But the thing is, in my opinion, not enough people talk about the kid who plays Jem, because as the older brother, he has kind of an idea of what's going on in the world. He knows for a fact that there are some people who just will not listen to reason, but he doesn't know how to explain it to his little sister, because she's only a couple years younger than him. And she's still very naive in her own sense, especially that fantastic scene at the jailhouse where the mob is getting ready to kill Tom, but Atticus has a gun. He knows for a fact that they're coming. He's waiting. He's doing everything he can for his client. But then all of a sudden, Jem, Scout, and that one friend, I think it was like, I think his name was Dill or something like that. He was never my favorite character, but he's the character that the real life offer based on Truman Capote because she and him were childhood friends, and that was where the semi-autobiographical stuff came in. But I love that sequence where they show up in front of the mob. Atticus tells them to go home, but Jem stands his ground, lets him and the kids stay there, which is eventually what gets the mob to go away because Jem recognizes one of them as like her friend's father, and he feels incredibly embarrassed that he was going to do anything against this girl's father. And Jem knows for a fact that if he's going to follow his father's teachings to stand his ground against bigotry, he has to stand up to his own father when he is questioning authority that makes little to no sense whatsoever. In my opinion, that's got to be like the most underrated scene throughout the entire movie. And given the subject matter and some of the certain phrases that are in the book, I'm amazed that this book is even in any school libraries to begin with. But the fact that someone puts those books in school libraries to begin with knows for a fact that it is in 100% good faith and then some. It knows for a fact that these themes need to be addressed. It knows that history needs to be looked at instead of hidden. Whoever is complaining about the Dr. Seuss books.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say that's really stupid. Like, why are they not mad about Huckleberry Finn or any of these? Like, it's in the past. Don't read it if you don't like it.
Or Lord of the Flies. There are literally one or two.
I haven't read that in forever.
For no reason, but it has nothing to do with the rest of the book and the fact that.
Or John Steinbeck, he has a lot of things that could be considered not PC anymore. So
hell, the state that he grew up in, the state that he wrote Grapes of Wrath about. That state fucking burned all of their copies of Grapes of Wrath because they hated the way they were portrayed, which I find really interesting.
That's amazing.
I found that out because that was back when Bill Maher was complaining about like Stanley fanboys and was comparing them to John Steinbeck, and everyone's just like, yeah, people hated Steinbeck too, you dipshit. But
people hate every author because they don't want a difference of opinion. They always want to be right. That's how society is.
But like the fact that these books are still in school libraries, the fact that these books are still in libraries really goes to show how much people have faith in these lessons, how much they respect the hell out of them. And it's just so, it's still ahead of its time to this day. I can watch this or Guess Who's Coming to Dinner more than any other race-related movie that's made nowadays because it technically does point fingers, but it does so reluctantly because as much as they like to have faith in people, they're one of the few cases where they can't. Yeah,
that's true. I mean, even in 42, everyone changes their tune. So, Gregory Peck is phenomenal in this performance. If you haven't seen his 1950s Cape Fear performance, it's the original, not the remake with De Niro. It's absolutely incredible. It's amazing. Yeah, that's him. Let me just double check. I'll double check. I got it on the shelf. But phenomenal performance. This is probably the best use of a courtroom. The way they shoot the courtroom, even though it's so small, they really make you feel like you're in the courtroom. M and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, even Inherit the Wind, use the courtroom pretty good. But this is probably the finest use of a courtroom I've seen in any film up to like 1960. Because there's a lot of films now that know how to use that courtroom. Trial of the Chicago 7 not being one of them. That's a wasted courtroom. They did not shoot that well. I'm sorry, Aaron Sorkin fans. Y'all can go back to The Social Network. It hasn't been good since then. Anyway, Gregory Peck, he is phenomenal, and this is definitely probably his greatest performance. Because you really, really feel for him as he's on this journey to discover the truth. And you as the audience are connected with him. And the town folks and everyone around him doesn't believe it, but you're like, you know what? No, he's got something. You're following his journey. And it's a very impactful movie. It's a very important movie. And I think it works better in black and white because you can't see color. The point is, we're human beings, and that's what they're trying to say. So if, by doing it in black and white, you can't tell the difference. Everyone looks the same. The only thing that matters is the truth. You can still tell a little bit, but there's a lot less than if you did it in color.
Well, part of the reason you can tell is that in the courtroom, all the black people are like right above, which I find very weird. That symbolism wise, you'd figure it would be the exact opposite, but if it didn't, like it wouldn't have that great shot where they're looking down on the courthouse when Atticus is the only one on the ground floor after he lost that case. Like the world is just looking down on him in such a pathetic way.
Yeah, this is a phenomenal pick again on my honorable mentions because I haven't seen it in about 5 to 6 years, but I love this movie. I just haven't been able to find a cheap enough copy, so yeah.
Yeah, neither have I. Like I had to browse for clips to get reinvested into it, but there was still some stuff that I had completely forgotten about.
Yeah, so my number one is not going to surprise you at all, and I don't think you've seen this, Tyler. I mentioned it before, I don't think you see it. My number one is Sidney Lumet directed 1957's 12 Angry Men. This is Henry Fonda at his absolute finest in a role, about 12 jurors in a room trying to deliberate whether or not this man is guilty of murder. It's a very simple concept. We get 2 sets. It's almost 2 hours long, and I have never seen a more engaging film in my lifetime. It literally is heavy on the dialogue. The character actors in all of this is absolutely brilliant. And one by one, the concept is this guy presents the evidence when they vote. There's one guy who believes, I don't think he could have done it. One by one, there's 2, then there's 3, then there's 4, then there's 5. Now this is adapted from a stage play and put into film and has gone back many times over. And no one has a name. They're just juror. You've got the old man, you've got the taxi driver, the guy who works in a factory, the guy who's the skeptic. You've got basically every sort of American male at the time in this room. Everyone from all over the place sitting there deliberating. And it's so well executed. Like this movie could have 100% gone south and been like, well, this is boring. They're talking in a room. But Sidney Lumet is a absolutely phenomenal director, and he is probably because Network is. I recently just watched Network, and oh my goodness, what a film! This guy knows how to make a movie.
I gotta get back into it because it's reality, unfortunately.
Yep, and I think some of the standout scenes are just the one angry guy who does not want to believe any other way because he's been set in his ways, and it does have stuff to do with race because the person on trial is well of color, and they are there and they're just trying to deliberate. And the first one to change his mind is the old man because you know what, he's like, okay, you know what, I thought for a reason, I thought for a minute, right? And eventually, and the cab driver starts to think, and it's all through logic and reason. And everything lines up. The smartness of this script, whether it's adapted from the stage play or not, to get this onto screen is something that is a lot of work just to make. Because stage plays are big and they're extravagant. And you gotta strip it down to the audience to relate more than just look. I'm watching a fun spectacle on stage. And then you've got the big turning point with the knife. Where they have the knife, and he snuck out and bought one from Chinatown, the exact same knife that they thought was rare that he bought for what, $2 or $3 from a street vendor. And just the way he starts to reveal it, and even the left hand, it's the left hand. He's like, well, how could he do this and this if his left hand was holding the knife? If that's the way, and it's just so logical, and so. It is one of the most incredible one-room dramas. It's one of the most incredible character pieces. No one has a name. No one needs a name. This is honestly the greatest black and white film of all time because it's one by the best directors from the 50s and 60s. Henry Fonda's absolutely best performance. He's done stuff, but like no one's going to know anything else he did. I can't even name a Henry Fonda performance off the top of my head, you know? But this is quintessential. It has a lot to say about society and the way we view facts and truth. And just the claustrophobic feeling you get by watching these people in the room cutting around from simple shots. It's not over-the-top cinematography. It's not heavy movement. It's here's a guy talking, here's a guy talking, here's a guy talking. Oh, this guy went out and looked out a window, talking. Boom, 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 boom. There's not a lot of room to breathe. It's just, here are the facts you need to decide. I love 12 Angry Men.
All very valid reasons. Lee J. Cobb, I'm pretty sure, is like the skeptical one who had been more than likely victimized in some way in his past life, which is what makes him just so gung-ho and skeptical about this kid being innocent. And the battle of wits between him and Henry Fonda are just insane. Like I've only
Mhm.
seen it once, and I think it was back in high school, so it's been a little while. But even though there were parts of the movie that dragged for me personally, just based on the fact that it is in one location, which isn't really something that Sidney Lumet can help, the fact that you're right. It is absolutely standard coverage, but it's the
Mhm.
size of the shots in certain characters that really gives you that emotional weight to it because you're focused in on their reactions as they're hearing this contradictory evidence and they're being questioned themselves over whether or not they truly believe the things that they're saying. Stuff that, again, unfortunately, is still a problem we're facing with to this day, regardless of what the overall argument is. Because whatever anyone is complaining about being misrepresented, it probably is true.
Yeah, and this one also is one of the only movies I think there's very few movies that I hold as perfect. Like even Clerks, I don't think is perfect. I think this is a perfect film. I think everyone in this movie could be nominated for Best Actor or Best Supporting Actor and win the Oscar easily for for their 5 or 6 lines or their 10 lines, or the full carrying the feature. This movie is built on a strong script with great performances and simple cinematography. The tech is simple; it's very easy to do. But they definitely could have got this wrong, but they nailed it. They absolutely nailed it. I don't think there's anything you could do to improve this movie. I like they have one scene in the courtroom. Go into room, discuss. That's it. That's the movie. It's perfect. It's perfection. It's perfection in filmmaking. I would say put it up there with like The Wizard of Oz and like the first Raiders of the Lost Ark as perfect movies.
Really?
Yeah, I love The Wizard of Oz. I love that thing to death. I know there's a lot of crap coming out about it, but whatever. It was 1939, and the first Raiders of the Lost Ark is a really
I
perfect.
remember what that crap would be.
It's mostly just I don't know. It's not worth discussing. People can look it up if they want to see it.
If it's the hanging munchkin, like nobody believes that anymore.
No, it's the sexual assault of Judy Garland by the Munchkins and other things, and the long hours and the lead paint, and yeah, there's a bunch of stuff. Anyway, regardless.
It's way too late to complain about. Wow.
Yeah, well, they put lead paint on the Tin Man, and apparently it caused skin problems. Yeah, all that stuff. The Wicked Witch of the West, like, burnt her face with the whatever, yada yada. But regardless, I think 12 Angry Men is up there with like near perfect movie, nothing I would change. So it's the only movie on this list of nothing I would change. There's very few. I think there's about 10 movies I would call perfect. I said that Run Silent, Run Deep is fairly perfect, minus one scene, but it's like almost there, but not quite. Maybe Bridge on the River Kwai I would put up there, but that's in color, obviously. But there's very few perfect movies out there. This is pitch perfect directing, acting. The cinematography is simple because they don't want you to focus on the tech. They want you to focus on the characters. And yeah.
That plus Sidney Lumet is one of those directors who prided himself with having a very straightforward and invisible directing style, which is a lot of. I mean, there are things that you definitely notice, like the fact that sometimes he films entire scenes within a master shot, stuff that would be great to see more directors do nowadays if studios would let them. But no, our attention span is going down, and studios are doing a really good job at responding to that.
It's called shaky cam. No, just kidding. There's a lot of other contributing factors. Shaky cam can be used effectively if you're Paul Greengrass.
Or Steven Spielberg, as I pointed out before.
Yeah, but anyway, that's our list of black and white films. Any other black and white films you just thought about while you're watching this and you're like, oh man, I should have put that on my honorable mentions or I missed my list, Because I was thinking about Eraserhead off the top of my head here, and I thought that's very interesting in black and white and weird.
Well, I get the feeling someone's going to kill us for not at least mentioning a Kurosawa movie, although I'm not a big Kurosawa.
They're great films.
And I like Seven Samurai. Everyone says Seven Samurai is his best, and yeah, it probably is. Like, I watched it on this iPad I'm recording on right now for like 3 hours straight, and I definitely enjoyed the hell out of it. I couldn't find it anywhere else.
I like Kurosawa. I do very much enjoy his work. I would say the 1927 Ben-Hur silent film is really interesting. That's the one where someone died in the chariot race, not the 1950s version with Charlton Heston. So that's the myth there.
Wow.
Yeah, you heard the chariot race thing, but that's not the Charlton Heston version. It's the 1927 silent version. That's like 50 minutes or whatever.
I haven't seen either of these, but if we're talking about modern black and white movies, there's stuff like Francis Ha with Noah Baumbach, or Alexander Payne's Nebraska with Bruce Stern and Will Forte.
The Artist that won the Oscar in 2010 or whatever. Pretty interesting flick.
Black and white silent movie winning Best Picture, and everyone thought Parasite might not have had a chance.
Black and white can win Best Picture. It's got to be exceptional. So, I think The Artist is pretty cool. A lot of people don't think so because they just don't like black and white. That's what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Never Let Go with Peter Sellers is a pretty great black and white film. He's a used car salesman trying to repossess a car, and it's really dark and gritty, and I like it. I know all people don't love it, but I really do. So.
In the same vein, two of Kubrick's black and white movies, The Killing with Sterling Hayden is a very good
I haven't seen that one.
That's a really good one. It had that original nonlinear structure that he was going for. I'm trying to remember what the other one. Oh, yeah. Doctor Strangelove, black and white.
Doctor Strangelove is black and white, yes. Great. Peter Sellers is very good in that. The pie fight was cut, unfortunately, but...
I am still looking to see if there was any footage of that.
Audio?
Wait.
Yeah, there's got to be something. I feel like the Criterion, if they ever do a Criterion, it'll have it on there and they'll get it, but other than that...
I thought they did.
I don't know. I've been looking into Criterions. I don't know a ton yet, but I hope they do.
You know what? I'm amazed that Kevin Smith has two Criterions, but I think Chasing Amy is...
What's his other Criterion? Chasing Amy and...
I don't know. As soon as we're done recording this, I'm going to look at it.
Okay, because, yeah. And then, there's a lot of great black and white films. My brain is blanking right now, but...
If I had seen City Lights, I'd probably put it on here alongside Modern Times, because I'd probably feel the same way about that movie.
And then, Errol Flynn's... No, that was Color, yeah. Captain Blood's not bad, but it's got problems, but it's still worth a watch. It cuts every time something interesting is going to happen. Just cuts to next scene. Lots of great stuff, and there's a bunch of old rom-coms, like Bringing Up Baby, black and white. That one's pretty fun if you haven't got a chance. Cary Grant's really good in that one. It's a Wonderful Life, yeah, that stuff. Going My Way with Bing Crosby, great little Christmas flick there, and stuff like that. Sergeants 3, I originally saw that in black and white. I know that they've got the color version available as well with the Rat Pack. So lots of good stuff there. But yeah, that's our list for black and white. Do you guys think we missed anything? Tyler, where can we promote things?
Well, in the description below, you can find the link to my channel. I have only reviewed 3 movies this year so far, which are Malcolm and Marie, which was a pretty good Netflix.
That's black and white, right?
That was.
It is black and white, yeah.
That would have been an honorable mention, but I had just seen it, and I'm not sure how long it's going to hold up for, but I enjoyed it more than most.
I enjoyed it, yeah.
I reviewed Flora and Ulysses, which had the potential to be an above-average Disney Plus movie, but it was just a Plus movie.
That's the superhero squirrel one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Where all of my DuckTales cast members are making complete fools out of themselves.
But Kate Micucci was in Garfunkel and Oates, one of the greatest female comedy groups of all time. And Tyler froze there.
So it's Kate Micucci, and what's the other girl's name?
Knives Out person.
She's gonna be in the final episode of DuckTales as like. I'm willing to bet, like, as a clone of the Kate McCutcheon character.
What is her name? She plays,
Catherine Langford? No, that's not it.
No. I'm going to look it up while you promote your thing, and then we'll get the name.
But yeah, I have reviews up for Malcolm and Marie, Flora and Ulysses, and Minari, and I'm debating whether or not to pay $30 for Raya and the Last Dragon, because people are really excited about that one, and so am I. I'll either have up a review of Raya and the Last Dragon or this Canadian movie that I was originally going to see before theaters closed the first time, and at 13,000 Feet, which is on digital streaming network right now.
It's Ricky Lindhome. Rick Lindholm?
Yeah, still
Yeah.
the fact that she's in like the very final episode of the show as basically a carbon copy of Kate Micucci, I find that just so.
Oh
That's just
my goodness! If you have not listened to Garfunkel Oates, "Pregnant Women Are Smug" is the best way to get into it. They got a special on Netflix too. They're really funny. They did a bit with Weird Al once, and they're just really funny people. That was a different time in their lives, though. They make ukulele musical parodies. People don't love them, but I do. So yeah, you know what I want you to review sometime? The Bash Brothers, the Lonely Island special on Netflix. It's like 25 minutes of nonsense. It's about two baseball players and steroids.
As soon as you and I can get face to face, that's a maybe.
Yeah, it's pretty great. It's actually based on a true story, and it's got like, if you like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, it's got all the stars from Brooklyn Nine-Nine in it because it's Andy Samberg, Lonely Island, obviously. It's phenomenal, and it's just ridiculous. It's like an extension of Popstar Never Stop Stopping, but about baseball. It's great.
Oh.
So it's really, really good stuff. Anyway, check out Tyler's channel, Tyler Wolf. 2S are fucking fantastic. Thanks for joining us on the Tyler and Josh show, the Josh and Tyler show. I always forget which way it goes, so I say it both ways because, like Stan Lee says, you can wear it inside, you can wear it outside. I think that's Big Hero 6. Ben quotes that a lot. Anyway, we'll see you next time. Check out all our shows on the Sharp Edge Cinematics here, and one day, maybe my movie will come out. Who knows? Thanks for joining us. Tyler, say something awesome.
Get off your ass and watch a black and white movie, damn it.
Yeah, and not Casablanca, okay?